はい、皆さん、こんにちは。アカデミックリンクセンター副センター長の国本と申します。聞こえておりますでしょうか？もし問題がありましたら、チャットの方に書き込みをお願いします。特になさそうでしょうか？大丈夫かな？はい、ありがとうございます。そうしましたら、本日ですね、千葉大生の英語論文にありがちとよくあるミス、避けるコツということで、セミナーを開催させていただきます。アカデミックリンクセンター附属図書館ではですね、学部の高学年と大学院生向けに、初めて、卒検とか論文ですね、修士論文等に取り込む学生さん向けに、研究と学習を支援する取り組み、エンカレッジ・ワリサーチというのをやっています。で、本セミナーシリーズもその一環です。で、本日の講師のですね、クインティ・ロー先生はですね、アカデミックリンクセンターの、今ちょっと多分チャットで、URL が流れるんじゃないかと思いますが、アカデミックリンクセンターで AEC、英語論文相談という、セミナーを、ごめんなさい、1対1のですね、英語論文の指導を担当していただいている先生です。もう多分聴衆の中にご参加されたことのある方いらっしゃると思うんですが、ここの、英語のレポートや論文の書き方を相談するというところを押すと、ムードルに申し込み画面が出てくるんですけれども、論文だけじゃなくてですね、論文の用紙ですとか、学会発表のポスターですとか、スライドとかそういうものもですね、皆さんの、書かれたものを全部こう相談に乗ってくださるという先生で、おかげさまでずっとこれ予約がいっぱい状態で、コマを増やしてくださいというニーズの方が多いぐらいなんですけれども、こちらで3年間皆さんの英語論文の指導とかですね、されてきてくださった先生です。で、これまでの相談研究に基づいて、千葉大生が特に英語論文の執筆時に行いがちなミス等も踏まえた実践的なアドバイスは今日はいただけるということで、ちょっと実習形式というのをお願いしてますので、皆さんとの間で簡単なやり取りが発生するかもしれませんので、楽しみにしていてください。で、講義資料ですが、セミナー終了後にいつも通り、ウェビナー閲覧者限定で Moodle 上のアンケートに答えてからもらう形になりますが、アンケートと引き換えで配布をしております。で、後ほど、終了後にチャットで URL をお知らせしますので、そちらのアンケートに答えた後、本日の配布資料いただいてください。で、著作権の関係上ですね、ちょっと第三者への再配布やネット上のアップロードはご遠慮いただいております。で、本日のセミナーも録画を行っていますので、その旨はご承知おきください。特に質疑の時ですね、声が入ってしまうと思いますので、よろしくお願いします。声でもさい。チャットの文章と入ってしまうと思いますので、あまり不必要にプライベートな情報を流さないようにしてください。で、収録動画ですが、後日学内者のみが見ることのできる限定コンテンツとして配信をいたします。ですので、ちょっと本日は皆さん自身での撮影と録音はご遠慮ください。また、もし接続不良等でダウンした場合は、録画が後で見れますので、その時、録画をご覧になっていただいた方がいいかと思います。で、アップ時には、ツイッター等でその、録画がありましたよっていうのをお知らせするんですが、またちょっとチャットに流れると思いますが、こちらの支援ポータルのですね、中に、その録画を公開することになっています。で、ちょっと実は皆さんに、過去の動画ってどこで見れるんですかっていうご質問をよくいただくので、実はクエンティン先生以外の方にも今まで何回か、講義をしていただいているんですけれども、こちらのエールとか先ほどお見せしたポータルのですね、検索っていうボタンを押していただいて、それのイベントセミナーっていうところを押していただくと、今までいろいろな先生にやっていただいたこういう講義の録画が全部こう見れるようになってますので、もし興味のある方はこちらもご覧ください。はい。ということで、ちなみに質問なんですけれども、質疑は講義の後に質疑の時間があります。ただ、今回、実習なので、もしかしたら先生の方からチャットに質問等が、できる可能性がありますので、ただし、英語による書き込みになりますので、英語で書き込みをお願いします。質問したいことがある人は、ウェビナー中にチャットで書き込んでおいてください。で、参加者の皆さんに、あらかじめ書き込んでいただいたものを、クエンティ先生が講義の最後だったり、あるいは適宜、その時に口頭で、英語で質問に答えてくださるという形になっております。すいません、説明が長くなりましたが、それでは本日の講師、格達コミュニケーションズ株式会社、学術編集構成担当という方が気になっておりますが、クエンティロー先生からご講義をいただきます。そう、クエンティ先生、please start it.
Thank you, Kunimoto Sensei. Hello, everybody, and today we will look at a workshop. So let me share my screen with you. Okay, can you see this? Maybe. Okay. Okay, so yes, so welcome to the workshop today. So First, I would just give this is a workshop with Heritage, and this is a bit of background about what Heritage is and our company has been one of the leaders of academic solutions. Sorry. Okay, so here's a little bit of information about me for those that don't know, or nice to meet you for some of you for the first time. I'm from Australia and I did a PhD in Sydney on koalas, and then I moved to Japan for some research work, and I'm now an academic editor for over 5 years, and I've been working with Chiba University since just before the pandemic. And yeah, I have many hobbies, including tennis and photography. So yeah, I want to start off with just using a poll to interact with you a little bit. So I'm interested to know where all of our students or members are from. So I'm going to start a poll. Okay, so please vote in the poll to tell me where you are from. I think you can see. Can you see the poll? Oh, yes. Okay. Okay, great. So we have most of the students are from Kanto. Um, so welcome. And yeah, I'm interested to know other places, but unfortunately, uh, I can't ask too many questions about exact places. Thank you. So the next poll I'm interested to know is which field or department that you are all from. Let me just open that poll. Yeah, so I'm going to use this poll system a little bit later when we do some of the workshops together. So that way we can try to interact with each other without, even though we're online. Okay, so we have, I'm not sure if you can see the results, but I think you can. But maybe 40% are in nursing or medical sciences. So that's the majority, and then a few others in engineering and humanities. Yeah, so we have a good range of different fields. Okay, thank you for responding. Okay, so this is the outline of the seminar today. I will do mainly 3 sections. Um, and yes, if you have any questions, please type it in the Q&A section, and we have 5 minutes at the very end to discuss some of the questions. Okay, so let's go to the first section, which is how to structure your manuscript. So this is just a very brief overview on how to write or structure your manuscript. So firstly, we have to think about that manuscripts have 2 different orders of concern, so 2 different levels. The first one is the high order concern, so you can see on the left side. So this is more big, large scale things that you think about when you are preparing to write your paper. So you think about the focus. What's the focus of the manuscript? Who's the audience? Is it going to be researchers that are experts in the field, or is it going to be more public? And then we also think about the purpose and organization and development. And so this is for very broad, uh, large scale. And then when we look at the lower scale on the right side, this is more about where the Chiba University consultation and academic services play a role, which We look at language, spelling, word choice, punctuation, and sentence structure. So this is where editors like myself can help with these kind of issues. Okay. And I think many of you are aware of this basic structure, but I'll just go through it just in case there's some of you that are new to academic writing. So this is the basic structure. So usually you have the title and then the abstract, which is a short summary of your entire research, and then some keywords. And then the main paper starts with the introduction, and this can be combined with the literature review. So it's a combination of the background and then the literature. And then we have methods, results, discussion, and conclusion. And I'll go into this a little bit more detail in the next slide. And yes, as it's written here in the pink, of course, every research paper and every field is different. So, for example, engineering, from what I've seen, some engineering papers focus a lot more on the results and less on the literature. And yeah, whereas other fields like medical research, they do more of the literature review. Okay. So the basic structure when we look at the paper is that it starts off general with the introduction and the literature review. And then we have specific. So then we talk about the specific methods and specific results of your research. And then it goes back out again into the general direction when we have discussion, when we look at the bigger picture, what the applications of your research has to do with the rest of the society or rest of the field. So yes, I'll just quickly go through each section in more detail. So the introduction, it provides really important background as well as the nature of the problem. So what's not known and what needs to be known, and then why this topic is important, as well as the newness of the research, what makes it novel. So what usually in the introduction you highlight what research has been done and what questions there are. So what missing information there is. And then that leads to the presentation of the aims or the purpose of the thesis or the article, and then you outline the intentions. And yes, usually in combination with this, generally the literature review is combined with the introduction, depending on what kind of research article you write. And so you highlight the previous studies, the previous research that has been conducted that's related to your question. And then you can review the relationship between these previous studies. And then the next part is this more specific part, which is specific to your study. So you do the methods. And so this part you provide information on the experimental design or the design of whatever model or simulations or materials that you've done, and as well as any procedures and assumptions and data that you have used. And then after you've explained the methods, then usually the next step is to explain the results, so the main findings from your research, or so mainly the arguments and what you've accomplished from your experiments or from your simulations or whatever you have done in the methods. And then finally, the last part is to summarize all of your findings, interpret them, and point to the applications and the implications of your findings. And sometimes people will focus on different aspects. Some people will talk about the strengths, and some people also talk about the limitations of their research and what that means for. Usually, this is set up for future research. So that's the overall structure of the research article. So a lot of people might think, oh, how should I start off? first when I'm writing a paper, and there's no magic rule to it, but usually the tip is to write an outline first. So this outline is it's kind of just listing what you want to do right in your article. So in this part, you would organize the main points of your outline in order. So starting with the introduction, the methods, the results, and the discussion. So you think about what kind of points you want to discuss in each section. And so generally, once you have these points, then these should be no more than, according to general rule, you shouldn't write an outline that's more than 4 pages. And once you have this outline, you have this overall picture of your paper. And then you can expand on each of your little points, and then that will form your research paper. That's a general tip that some people, and including myself, suggest when you first start to write a paper. So that, because this workshop today is very short, we have just very brief overview of the structure of the paper. So now we'll continue to the second part, which is focusing just on one aspect of the paper that I wanted to work with you today, which is abstracts and what makes a good one. So as I mentioned very briefly before, the abstract it's a summary of your entire paper. So it covers a little bit of background and a bit of results and a bit of discussion, and we'll go through that in a moment. But firstly, there's a little bit of interesting data that we found was that in one study that was conducted a short while ago, that they looked at 8,000 manuscripts and found that only 7% are accepted every year, and up to 25% of rejections are due to poor abstracts. So that means that abstracts are quite important to be clear and to avoid rejection from journals. So today, hopefully, we can learn a few things, or I can show you a few things on how to make a good abstract. So there's two general types of abstracts. I will provide these slides for you after the seminar, and we can distribute it. So please don't worry about taking too many notes. The first type is on the left is the descriptive abstract. So a little bit shorter. And what these abstracts do is they tell the reader about the general content of the paper, and they don't provide final conclusions of the research. And generally, this is quite short compared to informative abstracts. So most journal articles, especially medical and scientific abstracts, will be informative abstracts. So what they do is they provide information about the paper. They also provide a bit of information on the scope, the introduction, as well as methods and materials that were used. And then at the end of the abstract, they will have some statements on the results and the perspectives. And generally, this abstract is a bit longer, so about 200 to 300 words. So today I would like to kind of focus on this informative abstract. And you may have received some documents already, but it's also available on the resources, I think, if you can access it. If you can't access the files, we can send it to you in a moment. Okay. So as I said, we want to write a good abstract. So let's go through exactly what makes a good abstract. So I'll go through each point. So a good abstract is expressed in a coherent, concise, and independent manner. So this means that it has to be very clear and not too much information, not too much detail, so that anyone who reads it, even if it's not in their field, they can understand it just by reading it. A second point would be to give logical connections and transitions between the information provided. So this would mean that each sentence kind of flows from each other. So usually you start with an introduction with some background information, and then you link it to the methods that you're doing. So there should be some logical connection between each sentence within your abstract. The third point is that a good abstract does not present information that is not included in the paper. So we we can't judge that today in today's session because we don't have the full paper. But say, for example, if an abstract introduces some result that's not in the main part of the paper, then that's not a good abstract. And then the fourth point is it's understandable to a wide audience. So that's a little bit linked to the first point. So usually if you use too many technical words or you don't explain some of the more complicated things in the abstract, then that might be difficult to understand for a wide audience. But of course, it depends on the target. So if this abstract is for a very unique conference, just for a very small group of experts, then of course you can use more technical words and terms. But if you're going to a more general conference or a conference for the general public, then that would be a lot different. You would use more simple terms or you would include some explanations. And then the final point for what makes a good abstract is it is in the introduction, body, conclusion format. So it would start with introduction, then have a body which includes the results and the methods, and then has a nice conclusion at the end. Okay, so let's start with our first activity. So I think all of you may have received the abstracts. I sent 2 abstracts, but if you can't see it, they should be in the resources. If you have any issues, just please post it in the Q&A. Okay. So let's go through each abstract. So I will just show it on the screen. This is the first abstract. So both abstracts I've presented are on the same topic. And the topic is called Japanese food trends driven by social networks. Social network is SNS in Japanese. Okay, and so I'll give you a few minutes to read this abstract, and I will open the poll for abstract A, which would be for you to select which areas in this abstract need improvement. And you can choose more than one option in this poll. So I'll give you maybe 2 minutes to have a look at this, please. I'm sorry if the poll was covering your abstract. I, okay. So, okay, so maybe some of you can't see the poll results, but most of you commented that there was some problems with logical flow of information. Yeah. So the majority of you said that, and let's have a look. So it's possible that this is due to the information is a little bit unclear. So probably let's have a look. So this is my annotation afterwards. Okay, so I think the main issue I found with this abstract is there's a lot of grammatical errors. So as I mentioned, these are not the main points of a good abstract, but they can affect how the reader can enjoy reading your paper. If they see grammatical errors, that will make them not so happy. But yes, so and then another issue is that there's the flow of information is it's okay. So I want to explain. So the first part is presenting introduction and background information. So they're presenting about what they're explaining what uh, influences are, and then presenting a bit of background information about previous studies. And then it's presenting the present study. It's talking about the goals of the present study and then the methods that they did. And then it goes on to the results and then the applications of their results. So in general, I think the logical flow is okay, but I'm interested to hear why some of you might think there's a logical flow problem. But maybe if you can write that in the chat, that would help me afterwards. So let's have a look at the second abstract, and I will open the poll and then I'll hide it. So then I'll open the poll after a minute. Yeah. So it's the same topic, but different abstract. So please have a read. Okay, I will open up the poll and then please vote on what you think is weak about this abstract. And you can vote for more than one option as well. Can you see the results? I wonder. Can someone please write in the chat? Okay, thank you. Okay, so most of you said that there's problems with the logical flow and the overall structure. Okay, most of you said overall structure. Okay. And yes, I would agree with you. The overall structure is a little bit weak. So let's have a look. Yes. So as you can see, the first sentence, it's almost a conclusion sentence. It explains the methods and the findings. So that already is a bit strange. It's giving a conclusion in the first sentence. So generally, the conclusion should be towards the end of the abstract. And so this kind of impacts the logical flow as well. So yes, this sentence should be moved down. Um, yeah, but some of I wanted to highlight that the strengths of this abstract is that it clearly explains the methodology in a short in two or three sentences. So it might be too long, but it's quite easy to understand for a reader. Yeah, and then another small comment is that um, if it's qualitative study, we try to avoid just using one single quotation from one surveyed participant. Yeah, so yeah, every abstract has very variety of qualities to it. So it's good to just my advice is to read many abstracts in your field and see what makes a good one is one that you can understand very easily, even though you might not know everything about that field. And I forgot to mention in abstract A is also one comment is that we want to avoid using citations in the abstracts. Yeah. So hopefully that's a good exercise for you to more critique on what makes a good abstract. And so that if you know how to critique an abstract, then you can learn how to write a good abstract. Okay. So let's continue to our third section, which is some of the common writing mistakes that are made by authors and some tips to avoid them. So this will be a little bit open forum, but I'm not sure if people are comfortable with talking. But my first question here is, what do you think is a common mistake that you make in your writing? So this is not a poll, unfortunately. So it's more of a open chat. So if anyone wants to share in the chat, um, please do so. If you are too shy, please just write it down in your own notes, just for you to reflect on. 自分のノートで書いてください。Okay, so thank you, Abe-san. So one of them is mistake of tense. Another one is grammar. Yeah. And another one is articles. Thank you to Minami-san and Tokui-san. Yeah. So yes, those are very common mistakes. And yeah, let's go through some of them today. Um, and spelling mistakes as well. Thank you. So yes, unfortunately, I won't be able to go through grammar, and articles today, but maybe in the next workshop we can do that. Okay, thank you for sharing. Okay, yeah, I'll take these on board as well. Thank you for sharing, but you can continue to share them. Okay. So according to some data that some researchers did, this was mainly with Chinese English and Korean English learners. So these are the most common grammatical errors. So the most common is the use of the verbs. So as one of you have mentioned, the uses of the proper verbs is important. And so today I will just go through just a few of them. I'm sorry we don't have time to go through all of them. So we'll focus on verbs, tenses, and subject verbs. Okay. And then at the end, we'll do an exercise on preposition as well. And I'll explain what that is. Okay, so first we'll have a look a bit at reporting verbs. So this is, for example, Lee, 2008, found states that blah, 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 blah. And a lot of verbs can be used in this kind of context. So there's over 400 reporting verbs that have been used. And so some of the most common ones that you can use in your writing, you don't always have to use the same one in the paper. You can vary it a little bit. So these are the ones that are most common. So like describe, find, report, suggest, demonstrate. So our study demonstrates that blah, 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 blah. So these are some of the good ones that we recommend that you use for your writing. Okay, the next one is I want to explain the difference between indicative and informative verbs. So the first one, indicative, it's what the paper is going to be about. So in this example is Tanaka's study examined the galaxies. So this, in this case, examine is, it takes a direct object. So this is examining something directly. And then the second type of verb is an informative verb. So it discusses the claims. So it looks deeper. Instead of just the object itself, what does it mean? So in this case, it would be Tanaka's study showed that dark matter accounts for the missing mass in galaxies. So, and in this case, when we use informative verbs, we generally use this that clause. But it's not always true. So the use of these two types of verbs are important to understand, especially when we're referring to tables and charts in your papers. Okay, so in the next table, this will give you a summary of which verbs are indicative and which ones are informative and which ones can be used in both cases. So, and then I'll give an example. So, for example, if we use show, this can be both an indicative verb and an informative verb. So, for example, table one shows, so we explain the direct thing. So, table one shows the results of a population analysis. And the informative is a bit more detailed. So, what does it actually show? Like the interpretation. So, table one shows that population A is decreasing. And so, potentially, we can interchange this verb show with any of these other verbs. For example, table one reveals the results of the population analysis. And then table one suggests the results of population analysis. That one doesn't work, so that's why it's a bit strange. And then the same case for this one. So table one, if we use table one provides that population A is decreasing, it's a little bit strange. ちょっとおかしい. Okay. Okay. And then the next type of verbs that I would like to go through with you is called verb tenses. So there's the present tense and the past tense. So I've found that to be, when I've talked to many of you before, that seems to be sometimes there's a mix up of using which one is suitable for your paper. And so I want to try to explain that. So for present tense, we usually use that for established facts and to talk about the descriptions of the figures. So, for example, cats like to eat fish. That's an established fact, I think. For maybe some people disagree, but that's a fact according to this paper. And then another one, present tense, to talk about descriptions would be figure one shows that cats like to eat fish or something like that. And so when we use past tense, that's referring to something a bit more specific. So some specific results, specific references. And so we use past tense. So for example, we found that cats like to eat fish. So here's a few examples. A little bit more complex, but this is the present tense. So this study suggests changes to how behavior therapy is currently being used in the treatment of post-traumatic stress syndrome. So this is like a current established fact or a general statement, because this is something that's happening now. So we use the present tense. If we use past tense, then maybe it suggests that it's not used anymore. And then in the second example, this is talking about results. So usually, I think it depends on the field. So I think in engineering, we tend to use present tense for results, but for other fields, we use past tense. So in this example, it's the target SPP was estimated locally in each frequency bin, referred to as local or global decisions, respectively. And yeah, I just wanted to highlight one of the common mistakes that I've noticed in working with with some of you, is that sometimes in the results there's using of both past tense and present tense together in the same paragraph. So generally my suggestion is it's okay to use both, but maybe within one section or one paragraph to use the same tense. For example, let's have a look at this example. So our results suggest that cats like fish, but in contrast, dogs preferred meat. So you can see that this one is present tense, whereas the other one is past tense. So this means that there's a little inconsistency within the same paragraph or same sentence. So the best solution is we have to change one of them. So maybe this one we can change to liked, or if I can. So that way both of them are past tense. And the other option is to change the other one so that both of them are present tense. Okay, so now we'll do a little bit of have a look at one of the next errors that are common, and this is prepositions. So what is a preposition? So this is the description. It's a word or a group of words that are used before a noun or a noun phrase to show direction, time, place, relationships, or to introduce an object. So in the second worksheet that you received, there is a list of examples that we will work through together. Okay, and so I will open up the poll for some of these so that we can go through it. I wanted to see how you would. Just a moment, please. I will open it up. So let's look at the first question. So these are the options we can use for the preposition. So as can be seen, blah, figure 4, earnings have decreased. So let's open up the poll. And some of these have more than one correct answer. So please, you can choose more than one if you wish. Okay, yeah, so yeah, we'll just close the poll once we get 6 responses. And so, okay. Yeah, so that's the answer is So most of you said in, and the answer is in or from. So in this case, we can also use from, as can be seen from this figure, earnings have decreased. Okay, let's have a look at the second one. Oh, sorry, I've shown you already. So let's skip to number 3. So the second one is as revealed in or as revealed by figure 2. Let's have a look at number 3. As described blah the previous page, there are 2 common types of abstracts. Okay, I'll open up the poll. Okay, thank you. So 5 of you said on and 2 of you said in. Or it's changing a bit, but yes, let's have a look at the answer. Just a moment. On. So yeah. So in this case, as described on the previous page. So generally, in this case, in is also acceptable, but on is more natural when we look at like on this page, we can see abstracts. Whereas in this page, it's more about the deeper contents. So in this page, we describe the experimental methods. Okay, let's have a look at number 4. I'll open. So as stated, blah, appendix B, per is a Latin preposition that originally meant through. Sorry, the grammar is a bit incorrect in the end, but just please focus on the first part. Okay, so we have a few mixed responses. So many of you said in, but a few of you said a few of the other options. So yeah, it's a bit tricky, this one, but I think the correct answer should be in. Let's have a look. Yes. Okay, thank you. So I think due to time, we unfortunately can't go through all of these. So I will just provide you the answers, and we can send you the results afterwards. So same, yeah, for these next ones. I'm sorry we don't have time to go through all of them. But as you can see here, that in this one, as can be seen in a comparison of the 2 tables, or by a comparison, or from. So there's this one, many of them are acceptable. Okay, let's quickly go through a few other common mistakes that I've noticed. The first one is among versus between. So the main difference is that among is in the midst of. It's used to express when something is in relation to many things in a group. So in this case, this number 1 among all of the group. But usually in experiments, it's more common to use between. So when we use between, it's to express the relationship between 2 or more things that are individual. So it can be 3 things. So when you say the relationship between 3 individuals, it means the relationship between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, and then 1 and 3. So the interactions between all of them. So if we have a look at this one, this is a very common writing that I've seen, is there were no significant differences, blah, the 3 experimental groups. So technically both are okay, but generally we use between because we're comparing between 3 distinct groups and doing comparisons between each of them. But among is still not strictly incorrect. So both is okay, but it's more common to use between. It really depends on the context of your study. Okay, then the next explanation I would like to go through is which versus that. And I think I've discussed this with some of you before, so I'm happy to continue to discuss in the future if you have any questions. But essentially, this is the main difference. So the first one, let's have a look at this picture. So in this first picture, we say my bike that has flat tires is in the garage. So this means that in my garage, I have many bikes and only one of them has the flat tire. So this is what we call a defining clause. So it's one of the bike that has flat tires is in the garage. And then the second scenario is you only have one bike, and the description of this bike is that it has flat tires. So we would use a non-defining clause. So we would use which. So my bike, which has flat tires, is in the garage. And one hint to this is also usually when we have a comma, we always use which. Yeah, so this is the summary of what a defining clause is and what a non-defining clause is. So defining clause gives essential information. Okay. And then yes, so this is let's have a look at this one example. So I think I don't have a poll for this one, unfortunately, but let's just go through the examples. So the first example, one of the most important genes which or that are associated with cancer risk is PBC. And um, the answer would be that. And that's because it's a defining clause. So this gene is associated with cancer risk. And then the second example, it would be which, because it's not this, it's not this inclusion of growth data is not what makes, it's not the definition of this database. Okay. And then yes, another tip that I've shared with some of you before is sometimes when there's a strange expression in the writing and you're not sure whether the English is correct or the expression is correct, one of the tips is to use Google Scholar and to check your sentence or part of your sentence and see if it's been used in previously published papers. So in this example, say we want to see which one is more commonly used, which expression. So is it relationship between the three groups or is it relationship among the three groups? So then I would copy this text into Google Scholar and then see how many results I get. So for the first one, we got 71,000 results. And then for the second one, we got 21,000 results. And so based on looking at this, we would say, oh, maybe the first one is a more common or more used expression in the field. And so I often use this to check whether the terminology is correct or the proper structure of the words is correct. Okay, we have about 5 minutes to go, so let's work through this final workshop activity. Okay, so let's have a look at this. Choose the correct verb. So let's have a read. So therefore, the methodology of the generalized impulse response function developed or was developed in order to carry out meaningful analysis on VAR models. Okay, let me open up the poll and see. Okay, so there's a mix of responses. Yeah, so in this case, I suggest that we use past tense. So we're describing this methodology. It was developed. Let's load it up. Yeah. Okay. Okay, and then let's have a look at the second one. So to investigate the role of oligomers in this formation and growth, the researchers explored or were explored the relationship between monomer concentration and polymerization progress. Sorry, let's open up the poll. Okay, yes. Thank you. All of you have, maybe you saw the answer, but maybe it's explored. Okay. So let's, because we're really short on time, I'm going to go through these mistakes exercises together. So this first one, I'll just go through one example for each of them, and I will send the notes afterwards. So the first one is that this one is, each of these sentences are starting with numbers. So we generally try to avoid that. So either we have to add some words before that or change the number to alphabet. So that's the main solution to that. And then in the second one, the main mistake is, once again, this depends on the field that you work in. Some journals will not, they do have spaces or don't have spaces, but yes, there's no space between the numeral and the units. So here, between the units. So we need, ideally we add the units, the spaces between the number and the unit. And for some units, there's no strict rule. For example, percentage and degrees Celsius. Some depends on the fields. Some have spaces and some don't have spaces. Okay. And then the third type of mistake is the use of the right tense when referring to results. So whenever we refer to your results in your figures or your tables, or refer to the figures in your paper, we always use present tense. So instead of were summarized, we would use are summarized. And then figure 4 shows the results of the Reform Act. Okay. And let's have a look at this one. Recent innovations in technologies, GPS in particular, has revolutionized demographics. Yeah, so this is the problem is the plurality. So you can see the recent innovations is plural, but then we have has, which is singular form. So using a singular verb with a plural subject, and vice versa. So we would have to change this word to have. And the same would be the same case for this next example, was. Okay, so that concludes all of the exercises and the common mistakes that many people make in their academic writing. So I'm sorry that we were a bit short on time at the end, but let's open up for about 5 minutes of question time. And also we will be distributing an evaluation form. So if you, in this 5 minutes, if you can post any questions or fill in the evaluation form, that would be very helpful for us. Thank you. Okay, so we have one question. So I would like to ask whether there is any appropriate style of research articles regarding font, line spacing in Microsoft Word. Okay. Generally, there is a standard fonts, a list of standard fonts that we would use. I forgot the terminology, but generally it's Times New Roman or Arial. And the default line spacing generally would be 1.5 or double spacing. But the most important thing is that I would follow the instructions of the specific journal, because usually the journal will have detailed instructions about the size of the text and the line spacing. But if they don't provide any of that, then you can just use default Times New Roman or Arial font and the default line spacing of 1.5. Okay. And we had a question earlier from Aoki-san about what do you mean you do not write final conclusion in abstract? So I answered that briefly, but in the text, but I will just say it out in case people didn't see it. So that's for the descriptive abstract. So the descriptive abstract is a lot shorter, and we don't provide a conclusive statement just because it's more concise, and so we don't need this final statement. For example, in conclusion, our study found that cats like to eat fish, and this has implications for feeding and things like that. Okay. Um, yeah, so maybe we let's just have one last question. Thank you, Morishita-san. Could you tell us any good ways to expand our vocabulary of adverbs and adjectives? Um, yes, maybe just exposure to English writing in your field. So I would suggest to read abstracts. Abstracts are probably the easiest text to read. The abstracts from similar themes in your related to your research. That way, you would um, be able to expand that. And another tip, I'll show you an example, is to use Microsoft Word. Say, for example, let's share my Microsoft Word. So usually we would say this study showed that blah, 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 blah. So we can use a thesaurus function my tip would be to use a thesaurus function in Microsoft Word. And they will provide you with a list of alternative synonyms that you could use. But of course, some of them, if you don't understand the word, then it's important that you research the word first by checking the dictionary. So, for example, this study revealed, so we could replace that word. But of course, I would check the dictionary first to make sure that it says what I would like to say in terms of the verb. And we can also do this with adverbs and adjectives as well. So that's one tip I would use if you want to expand your vocabulary. You could read more, or you could use the thesaurus as well. But thank you for your question. But yes, unfortunately, I think we have run out of time today. So maybe I will finish and return to Kunimoto sensei.
はい、クエンティン先生ありがとうございました。非常に実践的かつわかりやすい説明で、AEC デスクを使ってらっしゃる方たちがね、どうしてクエンティン先生をすごく称賛されているのか、大変私もよく理解できました。ありがとうございます。それでは皆さん、チャットの方にですね、アンケートへの今から URL を貼りますので、はい、こちらに回答してください。で、本日の感想なんかも、そのままクエンティン先生にお届けしますので、もしよろしければ書いていただけますと幸いです。で、アンケートちょっとわかりづらいんですが、答えた後、一番最後に出てきた、 ものを押すとですね、手に入るようになってますんで、本日のスライドが。ぜひトライしてください。はい。それでですね、あとすみません。ちょっとなんか今日、最初にログインするときに少し戸惑われてだった方がたくさんいたようだったので、もしよろしければちょっとインターフェースが前回から少しずつ変わってきてるんですね。ちょっと今日の例えば自主形式の講義で、ここがもう少しインストラクションがあったら分かりやすかったなど、皆さんのご感想がありましたら、それもアンケートに少し書き込んでおいて、自由記述欄があると思いますので、書き込んでおいていただけますと幸いです。また、ちょっと、今回ちょっと初めてというか、かなり自習多めにクエンティ先生が組んでくださったんですが、これに対する感想等も書き込んでいただけますと、今後の企画の参考にできると思います。はい。時間等に関しても、ちょっともしコメントがあればお願いします。はい。では、皆様、本日はお忙しい中、3月の、もうちょっとすごく多忙な中、ご参加いただきましてありがとうございました。引き続き、クエンティン先生は、毎週月曜と木曜日に、AEC デスクで、皆さんでオンラインで、実際に皆さんが書かれたものを今みたいに、こう、ニュアンスを直してくださったりするっていうのを1対1でやってくださるのを、予約枠を取っていただければできますので、もしよろしければ、ご自分の書かれたものを持ってですね、小池先生にまた会いに来てください。はい。ということで、皆さんありがとうございます。本日少し時間過ぎましたが、本日の講義これで終わりにしたいと思います。小池先生ありがとうございました。
Thank you everyone for joining.